Welcome. Hi, if you can please take your seat. Welcome. Yes, right here. I'm Valerie Steele, Director of the Museum at FIT, and I'm very pleased to be introducing tonight's two speakers, Dorothea Mink and Homer Layne, who are the authors of an amazing, amazing new book about learning how to make clothes the way Charles James did. Homer and Dorothea were here a few years ago and gave an amazing demonstration. So today, after speaking, they'll also do another demonstration, and then they'll take some questions from the audience. So please join me in welcoming them.
The light is strong, but we try our best. So thanks for coming tonight and listening to us and get some, and louder? Is that okay? Okay. And get some insights on our work from the last few years. So I met Homer through Valerie Steele 7 years ago, and he taught me some details of the method of Charles James. And through working together and getting more into it, 4 years ago we decided at least to work on a book, and it's mainly about the method of Charles James, as he was also teaching and Homer was his student. So the title of our book, which just is printed, is The Couture Secrets of Shape by Charles James. We use this because Charles James always was talking about shape and not on design. He was kind of mad about all the people of designing and copying. Our book is split in 3 parts, and it's kind of a hybrid new form for a book, because we didn't want it to do a coffee table book, which exists already, and we also didn't only want to focus on the academic part, so it's interwoven like in real life, and it's about the last decade of the Chelsea Hotel, and Homer met Charles James in 1970.
And then I worked for him for the last 8 years of his life at the Chelsea, and I worked for Charles James the last 8 years of his life at the Chelsea, and that's where I absorbed, he passed along all of his techniques and things, which we started to write a book in '73. He got a Guggenheim Foundation scholarship to write the book, but it never was finished, and when he died, I put everything in storage. And then 40 years later, I finally finished the book, which, well, I didn't start then, but Dorothea prompted me, so we decided to make it a project.
Okay, so we just explained the structure of the book, and we are very happy because we are the 2 editors, but Iris is also here, who is our co-editor, and who did the graphic design. And I think I don't see too much because the light is so strong. I hope that some of our authors are also here, and some other people who really helped us a lot to really complete this. So let's take a look inside. The first part is the sound of shape and design. And maybe I just read a little part what it meant to be. The sound of shape and design, we draw on unique resources in describing and analyzing Charles James' innovative approach to fashion design. We aim to provide an understanding of what made James' creations so special and how his forgotten innovative principles can be applied today. In order to delve into the timeless philosophy and the reality of the Jameson working process, understanding the ambience of James' last studio during the late 60s and 70s is just as important and inspiring to this project. A sense of the life that went on behind the door, intriguingly labeled The Sound of Shape and Design, has been reinvented. And so this is why we choose for the first part of this book to take this. And this is one of the most famous pictures we got from the son of Art Kane, Jonathan Kane. And what I really love is that you really see everything that is also in the book. I just realized that it includes a lot of details after we finished our chapters on it.
Mm-hmm. And the name, The Sound of Shape and Design, it's somewhat vague, but in the late 60s and early 70s, Charles James started to interviewing clients, other designers, press people, publicity people, to talk about his work and his clothing, and that's where the sound of shape and design came from.
And never finished.
Right, and there's about 12 tapes which the Metropolitan Museum has in their archives, which you can hear. You can go online, I think, maybe, and hear them from the Met.
Okay, so the center of the book is the design practice of a fashion genius, and the fashion genius we took from the early 80s catalog, and in this part we really explain step by step how young designers and students can work today, but we connect it also to original material from the time. So we have 2 pictures to just demonstrate what it is. And in the third part, which is really amazing, because I think Charles James was the only designer that I know who really thought about a real body, and if a designer works for people and for his or her muses, you need to have a real human body. And so what we do in the third part of the book, we show images and the research of Charles James, and we invented how to make a dress form with not a lot of money. You don't need to print it 3D, and to really learn to work on a human body. What is included in the book is a pattern sheet, and what's different is we don't give you a completed pattern, we just give you tools from Charles James, which are in different chapters in the book, and you can use them, you can adjust them. We explain how you can adjust them to your own muse, your dress form, and then kind of from the beginning start to work in this method. Just shortly to say, I'm a professor at the University of the Arts in Bremen, and last year my colleague from the theory department, she started a project, the Dynamic Archive. So it's different institutions and universities came together to in different kinds of archive, and it's not completed. The idea is it's not a completed book in our case. It's a starting point. So we want to invite people who work with our tools and with the method of Charles James to continue and to get in touch with us. This will start early summer, and the web address is in the book in the back. A thing that I developed with Iris was kind of, we didn't want to have an index, because it's more like really real life. Everything is connected to everything, and the chapters are also kind of interwoven, and it's easier to read it. How to navigate this book, compare. As a reader, you will find references to important creations of Charles James throughout the different sections of the book. You can navigate this information by following specific numbers in parentheses, and I go to the next slide. There you can see what it is behind every mention on a page. We place pointers to the other pages, discussing these pieces further at the bottom of each page. We call these pointers compares. So you have in the text, you have these little numbers, and on the bottom you have to compare. So you can just read it the way you like it. If there's something that interests you, you will find a number and the compare on the bottom, and you can cross through the different levels of the book. And I think this is kind of very connected to how Charles James developed his methods and also his life. So now we have a little closer look to the different parts of the book, and I hope that Paul is here, one of our authors, and also Couture. Maybe we see them later. And we don't follow the order of the book tonight because it's too much. It's more than 550 pictures and more than 400 pages, so it would take too long. So we just, maybe this is Homer's part, to just introduce some of people who were kind of in the community of the Chelsea Hotel at the time. Maybe we start with this guy lying on the bottom.
Yes, that's Charles James, and this is a whole set of admirers and friends that he got together to have a picture taken.
So this is maybe one of the most important players for our book.
Antonio Lopez.
The famous illustrator, and we have a lot of material throughout all the chapters. And then it's also important, Paul told me, or us, that, I mean, Homer knew it, that this man is as important as Antonio for the illustrations, because it's Juan Ramos, and they were an artistic team until they passed away. And then maybe also interesting, we have famous models in the backdrop. This is
Pat Cleveland and Jane Forth and Martin in the jacket.
Yeah, and
there.
then this is our cover boy Martin. And then we have also Corey Hay, who is a columnist and who also has a contribution in the book, which is an original interview with Charles James in the Interview magazine in '72. And maybe this is also interesting. This is Jean-Paul Good, also a very important personality at the time.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I like that a lot.
That was Charles James's psychiatrist, Dr. Alejandro Esquel.
Maybe also an important personality.
Right. And to the right, seated, that's Ruth Ford, who modeled the original Gauguin capes in 1929.
Okay, so we switched to the insides of the time, and it's easy to understand that this is Charles James and Homer working.
Yes, with a little more hair then.
Okay, and it's also like all this, I mean, all these pictures that we have, the black and whites, they were not developed. When I started to work on the book with Homer, I was allowed to go with him to his archive and go through the boxes, and there were some envelopes with undeveloped negatives. And when Homer came to Bremen, we just found out that there's so many interesting things. One little more, it's what I like a lot.
It's the view from the workroom at the Chelsea. And you sort of see the skyline a little bit, but it sort of gives the ambiance of the room.
Okay, that's important too.
Right. And every day when I came in, Charles James, well, for every person that was working with him at the time, he had a list which he had made overnight. He sort of, looked over the work and see what you did wrong or what you didn't do. So you got a list the next morning what you had to do. And when you did it, you had to check it with a red pen and give it back to him at the end of the day.
So, and what I liked a lot when I saw them first, that Homer always marked them in red when it's done. And you see on top, you see the date when it was made, so it's just a little sneak into the time there. So now we have a photo of Anton Porridge, and we have Charles James and Couture. We put this in the front of Couture's contribution, and here you get an idea of how, I mean, I never was there, but I got an idea how the studio atmosphere was there and where we took the title for the first part of this.
And this door was actually salvaged by someone during the renovations at the Chelsea, and it was sold at auction. And I found out then that Jerry Garcia had this room before Charles James took it.
So, and this is one, maybe this jacket, the famous Eiderdon jacket, was the clue for me why I was so interested in learning more about Charles James. And what I think is amazing, this is maybe you know, the original picture of the late 30s of the evening jacket. And in the 60s, when Charles James got the jacket back, they played around with it. And today, our students, they think about their muse and not male and female anymore. But it's old. I mean, it's almost 50 years that the guys at the Chelsea didn't care if it's a man or woman. They just liked it and played around. And they went out for disco. And
Yes, Antonio wore it to some disco and ripped it. So that didn't sit well with Charles James, but I had to repair it. So. But it survived.
So maybe I just leave out what I was writing about the jacket. You will find it in the book, and because I try starting with this jacket, I tried to really go deeper into what was interesting to me and maybe also to you about this famous jacket. And it's really intriguing. And I had the chance with Louise in London to just touch it for a moment when we were allowed to see it and analyze it at the V&A 3 years ago already. And this is kind of, we switched to the Antonio drawings, which lead us through the whole book. And one more picture, or pictures from the Chelsea that gave us Paul.
This is in the lobby of the Chelsea, and on the lower left we have Juan and Charles James, and in the middle Paul Karanicas and Charles James. And then to the right we have Paul, Charles James, and Bill Cunningham.
So the picture that you saw before, Antonio, in the Eiderdon jacket, it's one of the famous Bill Cunningham pictures, and we are really very, very happy that we are allowed to use them. And I hope John is here too tonight, his assistant.
And this is some snapshots, Polaroids that I guess Juan took of one of the midnight or after drawing sessions, and they were just clowning around here a little bit. So
for me, it looked like they had a lot of fun at that time, working and just going out and enjoy life and inspiration. This is another one of the pictures that were never shown and developed before.
Mm-hmm. And it's models Norma Jean Darden on the left and Jane Forth. I think that's Antonio's workspace. And this is Pat Cleveland and David Wolfson in Charles James's 1929 swimsuit that he made for himself. So Pat has on the white, and David has on the checked one. And Pat is wearing the cupless bra. It doesn't have a cup. It's cut all on the bias, and it has a dart that shapes, for the bust. It flattens it a little, but it supports because it's biased, sort of like the Empress Eugenie undergarments. They were all cut bias on the top to support the bust.
So what's interesting is that we lead to another idea of the book, back to the compares. You have in Paul's contribution, you have the pants on Pat at the time, and in the step-by-step part, we show the pattern and the muslins, and you have a closer look how they were made. And there's one of my favorite examples in the book. It's Jerry Hall in the scarf dress, but there's someone else on the picture. Homer might just talk a little bit about Sputnik.
Yes, this was at the Everson Museum in 1975 when he had his first one-man show in a museum. And that's his beagle, Sputnik, in the front there. And if Charles James is holding the ring in his hand, it's like a big metal thing. Because he was so undisciplined, you had to have something to hold on to, otherwise he would drag you all over the streets when you went for a walk.
And you told me that after Charles James passed away, you had the dog for more than
Yes, I had
2
him
years.
for about 2 years afterward.
Okay, so back to the dress, which is more connected to the fashion part. what we did in the book, we have some original pictures. You have again the workspace, Homer and Charles James working on it. We have had a lot of nice contact sheets, and we had to make a choice. And then what we do in the step-by-step chapter, we really go more academic. We show on this side, on the right, you see the anatomy of the pattern of the dress and the muslin, and then we have in this case a model wearing it, and we mark the center back so that it's easier to really understand how it's wrapped around the body.
Mm-hmm. And the dress only has 2 pattern pieces.
So, and then it's a very early piece from the 1929.
It was
from
first
29, and we go back to the Chelsea atmosphere, and here again you have Charles James and the model, and it's a young man. His name is
Juan Fernandez.
Juan Fernandez, and there's also a little story about him.
Yes, I see. Well, when they were doing the drawing session with Antonio, the models there, they were a little too rounded for this dress to look good on anyone, you know. So Antonio, he excused himself and went out, and he came back later, and he said he picked this guy up in the deli and asked him if he would like to model a dress.
So and what?
So he said he would. So this is the end product.
So and we do a big step to our days now. This might be a surprise for you, but last year we learned that Rick Owens is also an admirer of Charles James, and we really want to connect the method to today, and so we wrote him an email, and he responded, and he was interested in working with us. So I met him last summer, I showed him the dummy book, and he said yes, he would do something. I went back to on the way here to Paris, and Homer gave me the original muslins and everything. We met him again, and that was the moment when he offered to make an exhibition, and that we would be the after-show event of the show he just had in Paris. So this was his invitation for the exhibition after his show. It's not 3 weeks ago.
No.
And what's amazing, you will see that later, he displayed for the first time a muslin of a coat, and this was in the afternoon, and in the evening on the show, he showed his version of the Charles James coat. So what he does since a while, what I really like a lot, is that he honors designers and artists that he likes. And he doesn't cover it, it's not copying, it's just bringing it to now and to the future, and with his way of styling. And then that's one picture, we wanted to have it in because his wife, Michelle, put on the exhibition in a very nice small gallery at Jardin Palais Royal in Paris. We took this picture because if you see this drawing, we go back to our book. They just took off the exhibition, and Jenny Dressform came yesterday from Paris back to New York. It was kind of thank you to the MFIT to making this possible. So we have the picture in our book, and we have original photography from the late 50s.
Right. It's called the Great Coat, is what he called it.
It's a great coat, and here, and then we show the muslin in the book, and here you can see more details how it was crafted, and this is one-to-one connected to what Rick Owens does now also.
Mm-hmm. And this slide on the right, Charles James always said that if there's 2 things that he would be remembered, or that he would like to be remembered for, was the displacement of the dart and the wall of air between the body and the fabric of a garment.
So in these, and you see it here, like we pinned it in my university on the dress form, and here you see the body, and there's always space between the body and the fabric. And what's very interesting, it's another view on Charles James' life, and also how he put together his philosophy These two aspects refer to Japanism in the mid-19th century, where Japanese society collided with the Western world. The kimono constitutes Japanese fashion from a Western perspective. This icon of Japanese clothing has a major influence on the creation of a new silhouette with a looser fit and a starkly minimized seams. So here you see, after some decades, what he made out of it. And what's interesting is we also, in some chapters, we show historical pictures, and this is Charles James' mother in the end of the 19th century. And this maybe is a point of view that he was his first muse. And the kimono goes through all the decades and the elimination of seams as well. This is one part which you will find always in the creations of Charles James, and there's another one, it's also his mother, some years later. In Ostend, Belgium, on the beach, she's skeet shooting, and you can see how to hold the rifle, he was always interested in that with military uniforms and be able, if it's buttoned up, that you would still be able to raise your arm and shoot a gun without, displacing the whole jacket or binding. So on the left is Charles James. He went to military school in London, Harrow, and on the right is his father, who was a general. So these are
in the English army, right?
So these are the two main aspects where you find resources of the development and also the really interesting and intense research Charles James did through his whole life, and we have more of this in the book. Also some tools from the 19th century that Homer had still at his collection. Now we need to look at the time. So we just have some examples of the main part of the practice of the fashion genius. We split in three parts. The idea was two things: to go from the easier understanding to kind of the basic, the essentials, and the advanced one. And what we also did, we start at the show. I mean, if you start in front of your muse or your dress form, and you need to start it. So we start at the shoulder, we go to, which is most interesting, the sleeve developments and the armhole, then we go to the waist, and we also go to the hip. So you have the whole silhouette of a female body mostly. So this is the third part, and we just have some examples prepared, and we close with the platitude, which Homer will show on the dress form, and we talk a little bit about metamorphology. The greatcoat is also part of the metamorphology. So we start giving you just an idea of the basics.
This is the workroom again. He had two work tables, so this is one, and that large sculpture thing in the background is actually, it's a wooden model for a sewer pipe in New York City. He collected things like that. And that sort of gave him the idea of the shape of a sleeve when it's inverted, which you will see later on the dolman sleeve coat.
So, and then what we do in the book, we have the original pictures, but then we also really show and explain how you can prepare your work table, how you prepare your muslin, how you really carefully need to start with the basics, follow the grain line. And
Charles James always had me square the muslin in a 6-inch grid before he draped. He said that way he can control the shape, and he knows where the grain is. Certain grains are stiff, so they stand out when you put tension on it. Others are soft, like the bias it falls in, so that he knows exactly where he is with the fabric.
So there's only one of our many examples with the original muslin where you really can see how everything was prepared carefully, and we also combine it with the spirit of the time in the early 70s with Antonio drawing. Then we want to show one example where it's really kind of clear that it's connected to fashion in the end of the 19th century. It's one of the early pieces which was made
in
through the
1929, and he made it. This was made from millinery grosgrain, which was only 18 inches wide, so it had to be pieced to get the volume of these garments.
So on the right, there's a detail of the famous Cecil Beaton picture where you see
The front and the back.
the front and the back, and then we show from a pattern book from the end of the 19th century where it might had the inspiration. And this is one, Homer told it before, this is one page from the original manuscript from the early 70s, where you see how the cape was draped and grafted, and you will find the whole section in our book as facsimile. And then back to when you want to start working, which is interesting that Charles James kind of shaped, this is the dress form that we have here, the Jenny. So this he prepared the shoulder part and you could work on it directly.
Right, so you would have the complete line of, because most dress forms just chopped off arm, but he wanted the complete line to get the flow of the shoulder line.
And what we have on the pattern sheet is, you have on the right, you have the adjusted shoulder shell for modern figure, and it's part of this
Pattern page.
pattern sheet. You can take it off and just fit it to your dress form. And what we do in this section, we just show how you can start draping the shoulder, and the cape on the left is what we did.
It's
2
the
years.
yoke from the grosgrain cape.
And on the right, it's a muslin from the 70s where they made a jacket out of it.
Right, where we used what's on the left and made a jacket on the right from the same shape. You know, that's sort of metamorphology. It's a jacket instead of a cape.
Then we have another example. What I like is that at the MFIT on one floor, there's a poster of this famous drawing, and this is the dormant sleeve coat. And
That on the left is the original coat that he made in 2 days for the opera singer Lily Pons. She was going on an international tour and leaving by boat. And he draped it on her, and it was made in 2 days and delivered to her on the boat before it sailed.
And we have a remake in the book, and we also show the muslin, and we show it in movement so that people who like to know more can try to work on a coat like this. This is one of my favorite Charles James drawings.
And this is one that explains the diagonal waisted pant, and also the layer of air between the body and the fabric.
You see it here.
And the diagonal waisted pants we'll see later.
Yes.
It's high in the back and it's low in the front, the waistline.
Yeah, and you see here you have again the
shoulder shell.
and the platitude, which you will also see later.
And this is the diagonal waisted pants with the cupless bra.
And what's interesting that we also have a picture in the book where Juan is wearing this pants, so it was also unisex. And we also wanted to show, this is one, you might know this picture is one of the most famous pieces, which was copied very often, I guess. It's the figure 8 skirt, and on the right is...
Well, Charles James had me make little miniature patterns so that I could understand, how it was made. The skirt, it's like if you take a big beach towel, you cut a hole, a U shape in the middle, then you straddle it between your legs, and you wrap one side over in the front and the other side over in the back. And if you look through the waist, the hemline would make a figure 8. You can see how part of the skirt is on the front of the leg, then it goes around, then it comes between the legs and goes to the back. And this was made in 1937.
So and this is another example for the Metamorphology.
He made cages and things, to make shapes so they could drape over it. Instead of trying to do it with just muslin, he actually built a shape, and he stuffed it with newspaper or whatever was at hand, plastic, and he used boning.
And when Homer was in Bremen, we made a crinoline, and we played around with it, so we moved it from the waist to the top to just see that you can build every silhouette.
And you can actually change the shape of the hem by, squeezing it because it's pliable.
So, and this is one of the, thank you, the sign that we should come to the end. So, we talked about it before. This is one of the coats which was made with this method. And we show one more example of this was
This was a muslin for a skirt. Well, it's actually ended up being a dress, but this is the skirt muslin for Lee Krasner, who was the wife of Jackson Pollock.
And also an artist.
And also an artist herself. Charles James made her a trousseau in 1961 to wear to her husband's exhibit in London at the Tate Gallery.
So, and interesting is that we have more playful things with the skirt because it was moved
up onto the shoulders to make a cape out of that same shape with the arced seam.
You can see, I go back, you can see like the shaped lines here, and Antonio took them like for the cape. Okay, so there's one part, only some more slides, where we talk about also really for when you want to work and do a collection or do pieces, you need a good dress form. And I was really happy when Homer showed me the materials and explained me that Charles James always was kind of really a scientist in learning more about anatomy and how you can build a dress form and work on it. This is the flexible dress form, but we don't go into that detail. And it's a Charles James drawing, which is in Houston at the Menil collection. We have...
These are castings of his original dress form in 1949. So he was experimenting with the shoulder shapes there. And this is technical drawings that he made, giving measurements from the actual dress form to a vertical line, and he did it all the way around. So if you had those measurements in a block of marble, you could really chisel it out.
Yeah, and what I like with the drawings that they look so modern, and you almost think they were made on a computer, but I mean, it was long before. So what we also do in the book, we have a whole chapter about how you really can do your own dress form. Step by step, you need patience and a lot of time, but you can just use the work from your handy shop and from your workspace.
And a model who can stand still for a long
2
time.
hours. So this was Sarah, our dress for, a student of mine at the time, and then for our dress form, and you start putting a very tight muslin dress on her. We also show how you can do that without having a pattern. And then this is...
This is gummed paper tape, and this is a technique from the early 20s.
So, and then you cut her out, and then you step by step work on the layers of the dress. Then you have kind of the pinned cover for the dress form. You can put it back on her to see that it really fits, that you didn't make any mistakes. Then we show also how the arm for the dress form is also part of the pattern sheet. And now we go to the last part to just explain what Homer will do on the dress form.
Mm-hmm. And these are platitudes, and I don't know why he chose it, because one of the meanings of a platitude is flat or dull, and he had a more a definition that said the state of being flat. So he took his pattern pieces, and they're stiff, and they're like a ruler, and you can just place them on the dress form anywhere, and you have a nice line that you can create a new design, either a seam or an edge on a new garment.
We show this, but I wanted to put something in to just give you an idea how you can use the book also, because depending of what you will do with it, you might have other ideas. And I talked to an art historian when she saw it in the beginning. She's my brother's wife, by the way. And she said, oh, you need to learn about Marcel Duchamp. And she showed me pictures. And in the end, after 4 years, I got back to this. And I think it's interesting because it's the 3 stoppages he made them in Paris, 1913 to 14. And Charles James, as we know, was later there at the at the Museum of Modern Art. Just one sentence about it. It's a joke about a meter. Duchamp noted about this piece, but his premise for it reads like this. If a straight horizontal thread 1 meter long falls from a height of 1 meter onto a horizontal plane, twisted as it pleases, it creates a new image of the unit of the length. Duchamp dropped 3 threads 1 meter long from the height of a meter onto 3 stretch canvases. The threads were fixed to the canvas to preserve the random curves they assumed upon landing. So when you will see Homer doing the platitudes on the dress form, you will understand that there's kind of an artistic connection. There's one more picture what Duchamp did. It's called Network of Stoppages. It's from Paris, 1914, and so he used the stoppages for his paintings. And we go back to Charles James. So this is more platitudes, so every perfected pattern piece could work as a piece for a next idea.
It could be a belt. We were using the belt from the diagonal waist pants today, but it could be a part of a sleeve or something, where you've perfected a pattern piece that you like, that has nice shapes or contours.
So we have 2 drawings where you can see the thoughts of doing new shapes, not designs, from Charles James. And we have a muslin which kind of is really connected to it, and we show it also. We have, again, the anatomy of it in the book, and we show it how it's the starting point for an evening dress, and we show it also on the model. And then we finish this part of this evening with the last Antonio drawing. And then Homer will show the platitude on Jenny dress form, and I will assist him. Thank you. So we need the pins.
This is one of the original waistbands for the diagonal waisted pant. So maybe hold.
Maybe you just look and we work. And if you have, it's too hard to hold the microphone.
So
I take it back. Okay.
that the waistband, the top edge is about 3 or 4 inches above the waist, but in the front, it goes below the natural waist.
So this is also included in the book. It's called the magic waistline, and we also have another thing on top. And you wanna explain the magic triangle? Maybe you will ask what this line on the dress form means.
Well, Charles James said that for a garment to properly sit on the body, that the weight should not be here on the edge of the shoulder, because I'm sure you've tried on coats and they feel like they're very heavy on your shoulder. So he developed this measurement, which the unit of standard measurements in Washington, D.C. accepted it. From the nape of the neck to the pivot point of the front arm, almost on every woman, it's about 10.5 inches, no matter your size, because it's related to the skeleton. And this one can vary, but he called this the magic triangle, where the weight of a garment sits on the trapezius muscle and not on the end of the shoulder.
So this is kind of the development of anchor points, which are also basic on his very complicated garments. So we continue with the platitude. You need the microphone?
Okay. And what he was doing is, you could take this piece from the belt, you can place it anywhere on the dress form and get lines that you can make as a neckline, or you can make as
Pin it.
So then you could make like an underbodice or a dress with this shape, that's already established. You don't have to fiddle with it. It's a smooth curve. You can just work right from the edge.
Another one, and then because I think it's really magic. I tried it on our dress form, and if it really fits, for example, at the waist, you can really put it everywhere. And you just follow the line of the pattern piece, and you will find a new placement for your new garment and the seaming.
Just place it anywhere on the body.
Fix it.
Mm-hmm. And you can put them right side up or upside down.
Oops. And this platitude is also part of the pattern sheet, by the way.
And you can mirror them. So only have a half a piece, but you can mirror the other piece.
Oh. Just take your time and pin it. Multitasking.
And that gives you, a line on a body, which you can only use this line, or this could be used as a facing. And you can work from just this edge and, make fullness or make it smooth. But you've already have an established curve, just like, it's like a ruler. You just work around the body.
Okay. Should we switch to the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and if you want to take a look on the original manuscript, it's on the table as well. I mean the manuscript from the early 70s. Maybe you read them? I'm not good in...
Did Charles James invent the dolman sleeve? If not, do you know who did?
It's a classic from the end of the 19th century, and I guess he was kind of doing good research. Maybe he had some on the attic of his grandmother, we don't know, and he just reinvented it and played with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's if you go on pattern making books from the end of the 19th century, either if it's American or European, you will find the basic for this.
What would Charles James think of fashion today? Well, that's a little hard to say.
We leave it open. He was complaining 50 years ago about fashion in general and the industry especially, so maybe we leave it
But
open.
I think they would, encourage people to do their own thing.
Yes, this is why it was kind of his will for Homer to pass the knowledge on, and we worked on it to make it accessible for people who just want to do fast fashion and really go deeper into it and really understand a human body and do kind of beauty with it.
What is your fondest memory of Charles James? Well, a lot of people thought he was difficult and hard to work with. I didn't have that problem. I seemed to follow along with his working methods. Sometimes we were working together. We didn't have to really talk. I could follow along what he was doing without having to ask him, what he was doing.
Can you read that?
Some people think the designer played by Daniel Day-Lewis in the film Phantom Thread was modeled on Charles James. What is your opinion? I don't think it was completely modeled on Charles James. I think it was an amalgamation of other couture designers. But there were certain things in the movie that I picked up right away that was a Charles James, not a signature or I guess, not a signature, but his actions or the way he looked. He always wore a bow tie. Daniel Day-Lewis wore the bow tie a lot in the film. And some of the scenes with some of the backgrounds, those were reminiscent of Charles James. And sometimes when they did the photographing, they had they had Daniel Day-Lewis on the floor. Charles James' pictures show more than any other designer. He's always on the floor somewhere.
On the seam lines. Okay.
What did he think about mass production? He thought it was great, and he tried to do it in a time when it wasn't normal or accepted for couture designers to do mass production. Halston was really the first one that really put that into, was able to get away with it. Charles James tried several times, but it never worked out. He was just ahead of his time. And then Saint Laurent did, the Rive Gauche and did couture at the same time. That was about the same time Halston, did his thing with J.C. Penney and still made custom-made clothes.
Do you understand this?
Mm-hmm.
No.
No. From where Charles James studied fashion and pattern making. He never really studied fashion, and he never really took pattern making classes. He learned from the people he hired to do his work, from the drapers and the pattern makers. He got involved with them and, wanted to do things that he wanted, not what, like in the industry, you do a sketch, you give somebody to make the pattern, give it to somebody to make the pattern, and that's, you don't have that much to do with it anymore, except in fittings or something. But he wanted to develop a system of doing pattern making that he liked, and it worked for him.
And what I really find amazing is today at my school and also at other schools, we talk so much about interdisciplinarity. And he lived it. He was inspired by fashion, by his mom. He also was inspired by architecture, by science, by anatomy,
nature.
By painting, by nature. So, he took his inspiration from everywhere, and it was kind of this holistic approach of living and working. And then we have a last one.
Oh, good.
Try to
It's
read
long. Right.
Can you read it? We don't hear much about technical skills from modern designers
Nowadays, there's an assumption that the technicians are anonymous. I can't make that out. And do not receive the credit. Designers also do not have the time, have Designers also do not have the time to study the art. Do you think it's possible for a working designer today to be known for technical skills like he was, like James was?
Yes.
Yes.
Try harder.
Right.
I mean, yeah, there are some from whom we know they are really into pattern making. Just Homer also met Astin Alaya in the early 80s, and maybe he was the last true couturier. I could meet him some years ago and had lunch with him, which was amazing. And he showed me on his work table how he crafted every single piece. And in Paris, we saw a small exhibition at the foundation there. And for the first time, they combined Adrian pieces and Alaya pieces. And you could see and you more could feel that it was not copied. It was kind of this
an inspiration.
True, really go deeper into it. And I mean also, we are happy that we have Rick Owens, and if you see how he works really hard on his collections, it's different, but you can do this also today. It's up to you wherever you want to go. And I mean, it's normal that you have a huge team, or you have a team of people who help you who are not in the spotlight. That's the system. Mm-hmm. I mean, also artists have their assistants who do the canvases, and then the design,
then
the artist does the rest. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
And I mean, we were invited that we also would do a book signing, and because we were just talking about it's always a team, we would like to come, our authors who are here, Paul just came, to come on stage, and if she wants, she doesn't want to. And I didn't see Corey. Is Corey Hay here?
Oh.
Yeah, please come also, and also Valerie, whom we really owe everything, because Valerie got us in touch 7 years ago, and she's our guardian angel of the whole project. So please come on stage, and who wants to get the book signed, come to us.